Hello and welcome everyone in another episode of Researcher Celebrity. Today we have Dr. Aarti Narang with us as our special researcher celebrity. Little bit about Dr. Aarti. She has done her bachelor's and master's in microbiology from Guru Nanak Dev University, Punjab, and then she moved to United States to do her PhD in biomedical sciences at Medical University of South Carolina, USA. She did a short, or we can say short and sweet postdoc at UCSD, United States at again. And then since then, she is working in industry at different levels and with some of the most reputed industries in the world, like BD Biosciences, Novartis, Evitria, and currently at Pfizer. With this brief introduction, I would like to welcome Aarti at the platform. Thank you, Dr. Aarti.
My pleasure.
So we always start our conversation with our researcher celebrities by asking that how and when you decided that you want to become a researcher.
I think I was just a dorky kid. I always wanted to explore mechanism or understand biology and life around me. And whenever I remember it used to rain, and I would just go and chase the worms, the earthworms, and dissect them and understand them. And my mom and dad always thought that I should pursue sciences, and that's how I hated math, so that was the other reason. So I was like, if I want to do well in something, it's definitely not engineering. Neither can it be finance, so it has to be science.
Okay, so then the first thing when because you were interested in dissections, the
Hmm.
first go-to in Indian family is like, okay, if a girl is interested in science and especially, even dissecting and like roaming around with the worms. So the what about the medical? Because normally that is the path which most of the Indian kids take.
Yeah, I think I definitely considered it, and I definitely did the whole medical stream entrance exam thing. But I also talked with people, and I definitely thought that the whole idea of like working with patients and blood and a lot of the stuff that comes along with medical field, I didn't think I would fit very well into. I My mind was more understanding the biology rather than doing like surgeries on human beings or dealing with that pressure in the ER or something like that. I didn't think was for me.
So you, since then only you chose that you wanted to become a researcher.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I used to say that whenever I was in high school too, that I want to be a scientist. Like it was a thing. I never said I wanted to be a doctor. Yeah.
So the intrigued brain and pursuing like specialization in microbiology at bachelor's and master's level, the first step I'll ask that when you decided that you want to join a PhD program,
Mhm.
not in India,
Mhm.
what was the reason that you chose United States? And if you had any research experience in India prior to that?
Mhm. Yeah, I did work at a few different research organizations in India, and I did my bachelor's, master's, like you said, in GNDU. And I think what was my observation in general was it took a long time, and I found that the type of impact and the type of science that I wanted to do, I was more interested in immunology, even though my field was microbiology. We did have some courses in immunology, and not a lot of the labs that I had access to or I was able to get into did a lot of significant immunological work. So, there are a few labs, very good labs in India that, are also very hard to get into, right? So I think part of that was if I wanted to do PhD, it had to be immunology and it had to be not 10 years. So, and I think I was kind of, this was like a false image that maybe PhD in America is shorter than what it was in India. But because PhD here can be very long as well. I think that was a myth that I had from being in that environment. And I think GNDU, where I was at, a lot of the PhD students were spending around 9, 10 years doing their PhD. And at that time, at least they were. I don't know how much it takes now, but I was determined that it wasn't going to be 9, 10 years of PhD for me. So yeah, here it took me 5.5 years, which is not short. Like a lot of the people considering PhD also should consider time, I feel like. And I think time frame is shorter in Germany. Like some of my students, when I was teaching in India, actually ended up graduating from PhD before I did. So, I don't know if that matters, but yeah, PhD in America is not very short either.
So let's start with the first basic step. Challenges in getting into PhD labs in India and in United States. How and you suggest because our viewers watch series, they want to be more aware while making the decision that they should make the decision to do PhD in India or in abroad.
Yeah, I think so. Let's address the first part of the question was what were the challenges, right? And so the challenges, I think, for me particularly were that I didn't have very strong research experience because after doing my master's, I did few years of teaching, and then I went into National Institute of Immunology and ICGB to do some research projects, like temporary projects as JRF, which weren't um, like I didn't have that experience. Only after I received the feedback from a lot of the universities and I wasn't getting accepted the first time I tried, that I decided to gain that experience. And then the second round, when I applied, I had 3 admissions. So even though I had a great GRE score, universities here look at the type of research experience and the papers, possibly if you have them, to be able to get into a PhD program, especially if they are, good universities and you're applying for good universities. So that was, I think, my biggest challenge, and I had to address that, and that's why there was so much time between my master's and PhD. A lot of people are more prepared, so if you can be more prepared, then that's really good. And I think, as far as making the decision of whether to do PhD in India or America or Germany or anywhere else, I think that's a very personal decision. A lot of people have different priorities in life. And I think for me, it was definitely pursuing immunology. And I knew that if the type of work that I wanted to do and the type of translational science that I wanted to do, because I wanted my end goal was getting into pharma industry. So for that path, like what the end goal is, you have to decide your path, right? So I think for me to be able to achieve this, I had to do what I had to do.
Nice. So this weekend, because not many of the researchers are clear, at least before starting a PhD about their end goals, that where they really wanted to end up. And this is something which we discuss at this platform that doing PhD is just the part of the journey which any researcher want to walk. And then
Yeah.
when we have figured it out that we actually want to join like pharma, as you said in your case. But when you started the PhD, you moved from from India to United States, and you chose the lab based on interest of your work. It's not about the university as such or about it, but the area of research which you want to pursue for n number of years for your life. So what you will suggest to our viewers that while considering or while making the decision that when they want to do PhD, what are the things which they should keep very important to it?
Right. That's a very good question. I think I wish I had that guidance going into the PhD programs, and I think I'm happy to share what I learned in my experience. I think one of the things too is that not a lot of the labs, even in the US, are doing research to develop drugs. They are doing research to understand a particular very small, minuscule part of science, and they're very specialized. And while it is good to be specialized, I think in the long run it makes sense to pick a lab based of the diversity of skills that you can learn, and also to pick a lab based off of whether or not it's drug discovery and development, or at least in that pathway. It can be a small piece of the big puzzle, but if it's not even on that track, like if you're, let's say, wanting to get into pharma but doing your PhD in plant biology, then that doesn't like add up, and so if you're doing if you're going into a field that is more genetics focused or gene pathways, then are they at least in some disease modality if you're wanting to go into pharma industry, so it's like you can do different pieces, but if at least it should be targeted towards where you want to end up. And some people don't want to go into drug discovery and development and want to go into agricultural sciences, and that's okay too. I think tailoring that based off of where you want to end up, like we said before, and also like the diversity of skills. If one lab only allows you to gain skills in, let's say, just Western blotting, and that's all you keep doing day in and day out, it's good for the lab because you are doing something repeatedly for them. You're probably very skilled at that, but it's not good for the student in the long run because they have not learned very many techniques. And as principal investigators or as leaders of the lab, it is responsibility of the PIs too to allow the students to help build a diverse skill set. But I think for me it was important that I learned some of the skills. Like for example, for me during my PhD, I learned confocal microscopy and flow cytometry, both of which formed the basis of my future jobs and were very, very useful in terms of me winning some of the interviews that I was able to convince for them to hire me. So I think if we don't think about the arsenal that we are building, then it's going to be very difficult in this competitive environment to score those jobs.
Absolutely. And this is something which I would like to say to all the viewers that, as Dr. Aarti just mentioned about the diversity of skills, this is not something which we give due diligence, because it is very important that getting the degree is part of your long path. And when you are prepared for a diverse situation, so you can work in different industries with different aspects just because you have gained all those skills during your PhD, because PhD is part of your training and it does train for your lifetime. So now we'll talk about uh, when you started PhD. You said that uh, at that time it wasn't very, guided, like not, we can say that not a very well guided decision, which you would have done that. So now, from starting date to your graduation day, how was that journey?
Oh wow. It was not easy. I think I may have thought of quitting like almost once or twice every year, like seriously quitting. But I think that part of the reason was that in my family nobody's ever done a PhD, let alone a PhD abroad. I didn't know many people who were doing this path, and I didn't know what to expect going into it. So everything was I had to deal with as it came along. And also, part of just learning to live in a different country, building a credit history, learning how to rent a place, like all of that was difficult. And so I think with mainly like starting to end, I think there was a lot of things that come into place, such as being adaptable to what life throws at us, and also being able to be a student. Like I came from being a teacher in India and being respected as a very good student. Like I was always top of the class. I was always kind of like top of the list, and here I come and everybody else in the room is smarter than I am. And so learning to be a persistent student and learning to always wanting to always learn from other people that are around you and thinking of it as a true learning experience is very helpful. Also, I think just not having done a lot of the animal work in India was a very difficult thing for me to get past, that fear of doing surgical procedures on animals, or doing dosing and understanding. But if, and again that goes back to like, if I wanted to be in drug discovery and if I wanted to learn preclinical clinical sciences, that was just what I had to get over, and learn. So that was also difficult. Then there were things about there's a lot of knowledge that you gain as a PhD student about plagiarism, and people dealing with those issues of how you navigate keeping sharing enough information where you are able to share and put your research forth to get these awards, but also not oversharing, and figuring out a happy medium in terms of how to write grants and who to share ideas with and how to get inspiration and feedback without being all of these things. I feel like were things that I didn't have much exposure to, and was really good to learn.
So we'll talk about the different aspects of moving from India to United States. And first thing which I would like to talk about will be the cultural shock.
Mm-hmm.
This is something which in our researcher celebrity conversation, that some of the students, they only see that A, they want to be in United States, B, they are so much driven with their passion for the research that they got this offer from this PI which they used to worship. So now they don't see anything else. And then within first month, or within first week when they land up, they enjoy the lab, they enjoy the research, but what they were not prepared was that now they don't have a family immediately with them to take care of them. And then now they feel it is difficult to talk to the people out of the science, which is still a decent amount of time because you have to build up your social network or from scratch. And that ends up taking some of the researchers back to India, which is good for us that we get researchers back, but not because they have gone through this trauma or stress of the cultural shock. So, what was your experience, and then now what you can suggest for our upcoming generation?
Yeah, I think those are very good factors to consider. I think being an introvert versus an extrovert in a personality type, and understanding yourself and figuring out the best ways to work with your personality to make an environment conducive for your thriving is very important, because oftentimes we when we are very ambitious and we have moved to a different country to do a PhD, we don't think about the human aspect of it, the aspect that is so important to nurture to be able to perform well in science. So I think that for me, I definitely broke a lot of the stereotypes in terms of how people expect a scientist to be. They don't expect a scientist to be very social or very like active in different other hobbies or have a personality, really. At least in India, that was the stereotype, not so much here. But I think that in terms I feel like I've challenged all of those stereotypes, because I definitely want to have a life outside of research, and I think that balances out a lot of the stress that research brings, and I think that's very important to nurture that side as well. And I mean, that can be anything, like from hobbies, from people, the type of people that you engage with can be very good, or even like walking out in the nature, or doing some exercise or workout or going for a run. It can look like different things for different people, but finding that what works for you and your personality type. Not everybody is going to be as social as I was or am, or maybe is not going to be so much into the types of activities that I am, but it's just choosing something that is going to be make it okay for you to be away from the family. And it is a big thing, and I think it's a lot of people really really and it's not addressed enough in science, but a lot of people who come from different countries actually suffer from mental health issues because of being away from the family, and it's very important to nurture yourself psychologically and physically so that you can perform well. Yeah.
So, now we'll talk about important questions. First, to start with, will be the stress which research brings. Because a PhD is only a part of a research. And now, when you have done so much of research in the industry part, that how it is different from academic research and industry, if it is, the stress it comes. So, first we'll talk about the research and then we'll go to the mental.
Yeah, so I think the um, nice thing about doing a PhD here is that um, yes, there's a lot of stress, but there's also resources that you can utilize while going through those stressful times. So I took a lot of guidance from like the committee that I had, and also like there was a international advisory group that I would go to in my university, and also um, the um, the head of the graduate student affairs. And I still have a very good relationship with them. They, always write me references, which is also important to, build good relationships with these people, so that whenever an issue does come up, you are able to find, an outsider's perspective, and find like how to logically deal with a problem. What's the university guidelines on dealing with a problem? And I think that, we can't ever expect what type of problems will come during a PhD program, and my problems might look completely different from somebody else's. But it's definitely good to have the knowledge of, okay, these are the resources and these are the type of people I can go to and open up about my problems. And I think that, people who are aspiring to do a PhD in a different country can find relief in the fact that, yes, like, yes, you might be faced with different problems, but I think a lot of the problems that students face are anticipated, and it's not unusual for students to have those problems and not feel like, oh, I am the only one who's going through this, or I am the only one who's ever faced this. And, talking to the advisory system that's put in place to be able to resolve some of the issues that are commonly seen amongst graduate students. And I think seeking support from the right people and not sharing it with people in the lab, like not sharing it with everybody you meet, but seeking support from the right people is very, very important. And I think we all learn from experienced people. So having some mentors, like even if they are 2 years ahead of you in the PhD program, or 10 years ahead of you in the journey of being a researcher, having a good mentorship system is important as well. Does that answer the question or no?
So now we'll go to the second part in detail about this, because what we have seen in India, and this is also true for United States, that people join as a graduate student and then they either, because of so many different reasons, then they take the master's degree out, because that is one of the possibilities in United States. But in India, what we have seen that people are, after spending 3 to 5 years of their life in a research lab, then either they drop out from the PhD, or in very worst case scenarios, which is very sad, that they commit suicide. So now
Mm,
in India, we started talking about the importance of mental health in researchers, either it is PhD student, postdocs, or even in faculties. That is what we have seen. So, what were your experiences when you were a PhD student, and now when because you mentioned one thing, that almost twice a year you thought of quitting the PhD,
yes,
more than 10 times in 5.5 years.
yes,
Was the thing which kept you going and still you are enjoying the research at industrial lab?
right, right.
The role of mental health, and what are the things which, based on your experience, you recommend and you say not to do?
Right. That's really good question. Okay, so one of the things that I will say is that I definitely leaned into the student health services and their there's resources again put in place for people to get through difficult times, and I definitely leaned into that. And again, therapy is something that's frowned upon in India, but I think that there's no shame in that when you are going through a difficult time and you're thinking of making major life choices like quitting a program. So that was helpful. And then I think the other thing that was helpful was having the vision that I had for myself. And that vision was being somebody who doesn't need to depend financially on other people and be able to support my family in India. And of course, a lot of the students who come, have that in their minds, that aspiration. And I think that's why we go the extra mile and are willing to do, so many things to make those dreams come true. So I think keeping sight of that vision was very important whenever I decided to quit, like having, my family in my mind or what my goals are for myself, and whether or not it was worth it to just give up on those goals. So that was really important. And then I think the third thing was that whenever I found something very, very, very difficult, and I think it might be part of how my brain works, was whenever I think some of it was overwhelmed. And I think what helped was taking a big project, like a big dissertation that I have to think of, and breaking it up into smaller chunks, and thinking of, okay, if I can just get through this particular phase of this big project, that's enough. And I'm not thinking about phase two and phase three and phase four. I just have to think about this particular phase for this phase of my life. And then I think that made the overwhelm just kind of lesser. And I think a lot of us researchers go through that because the big picture is so big that it's easy to get lost in that. And we want to do all these great things, but this is only one human being and it's only one life. And so we have to be realistic about what we can achieve while still keeping some level of sanity and being kind to ourselves in the process. So I think that
That
really
is very important. Yes, we agree with this part that breaking a bigger goal, like keeping the goal, is the most important part, which is true for most of the researchers, that stops them or, keep it postponing from quitting. So they always have this thing to do that, no, I can do this. This is the good thing, what we always say, that the confidence in it. But people do feel about they suffer with imposter syndrome, almost every researchers, which we have
mm-hmm.
about it, but there are only few exceptions who have never felt it when they say
Mm-hmm.
that either I should not do this or can I do this. But when
Mm-hmm.
you have faced any of those situations, how did you deal with it?
So I dealt with imposter syndrome, and I definitely dealt with feeling like the odds are against me, like everything is going, and like why is nothing working? And I think part of that was building a good community around myself that will support me, whether in the lab or outside the lab. I used to dance when I was in the research program, and I had a very good camaraderie with my dance community. I had very good friends there that really supported me whenever I felt like I was not doing well. And they would be like, oh my gosh, you're so smart. And I never viewed myself that way. So it was very interesting to get outsiders' perspective. And I think that's important because when you're surrounded by so many smart people, you fail to see how good you're actually doing because everybody else is doing so well. So I think that's important. And then the other thing was also like having good relationships in the lab, because sometimes you just go whenever you don't feel like you know you're progressing very well in the project and you just want to quit. You just have good relationships in the lab that help get you through those difficult times. That's also very important. And
Yes,
also like helps you get feedback as well from the people in the lab.
absolutely. And this is something which we always talk about. The lab environment is so important for any PhD student. But when you transition from PhD student to become a PI, even more important because now you're responsible for creating and then maintaining that environment within the lab where people feel comfortable to talk to each other, share their experiences, share their problems, and troubleshoot together. Because we always say that research is not a single person game, it is a team game, and everyone has to play it in between. Either it is within your lab, or it is in collaborations, or when you're developing the networking. So now, moving out of the PhD, now let's see the industrial side of the research. Some people believe that academic research and industrial research are very different. Some of our researchers, celebrity who we have from academia, have their own thoughts, from industry have their own thoughts. How do you see the change in difference, like the two places when you are doing research? You have done for your PhD and then a short postdoc at your PhD. and most of your career is in industrial research. How do you say that? And then we will talk about the guidance to the postdocs or to the future aspirants who want to join industry in their end goal.
Hmm. So I would say the one thing that's very different is that we don't get so attached to a project in the industry, and there's always this need for, um, you know, working on more than one project in the industry and being able to transition your mind from one thing to the other. I don't think I was very exposed to that in academic research because I was only working on, let's say, two or three at the most projects, and primary project being the PhD project, and then maybe something additional that I'm helping out with, or I'm going to get maybe a secondary or tertiary authorship on. So I think that, yeah, having to be adaptable and also multitasking in a way is something that's very important. Being able to manage your time across multiple projects is very important. Um, and everything being very business oriented and goal oriented. Because a lot of the times in academic research, I don't know if the question is asked, so what? So what if this works like that? And I think that that's the question that we keep in the front and center is like, okay, this is how this works. So what? Like, how do we benefit from this? So I think that's definitely knowledge. It's not just knowledge for sake of seeking knowledge. It's knowledge for seeking something as an end result. And so that switch in that mindset, I think, is important. Um, I feel like having some knowledge of business and project management is helpful. Building that knowledge, it's possible to build that knowledge during your PhD, I think. So that's one difference. Then what's the other difference? I think there is definitely more diversification in the types of roles. So it's like I'm not the only person who's doing, let's say, flow cytometry as well as ELISA, as well as genetics, or so different parts of the project are distributed amongst different people. So that really helps with not um, having to master so many things. So that's the other side where it may be a slight bit easier because you're only doing part of the big puzzle. Um, and I think communication skills are important both in academic as well as industry, but I think um, strategic communication is perhaps more important in the industry, is what I would say. Yeah.
Let's talk about strategic communication skills. This is something which is not very, most of our viewers are very familiar with it. So if you can explain a little bit more about the strategic communication skills and then how they can be, benefited with that.
Yeah, I think what I mean by strategic communication is like having an agenda for meeting, for example. Like if um, I am meeting with a supervisor, or if I'm meeting with the higher management, what is my vision for that meeting, and what do I want to what do I want to see happen as a result of that meeting? And I'm sure that's, some of us still do that in academic world, but I don't think I did so much of viewed every meeting as an agenda. I didn't do that in academic world. And I think now I view it as, okay, I really reflect back on the time that I've spent, and like, what are the changes I would like to see made, or what would I like to accomplish in the future, and then I orient my conversation and the work that we are doing based off of that. And I think when the management sees that you also have a vision, um, that really encourages them about you, and in the process you're also progressing in where you want to go. And I think that's just more higher level thinking that you sort of cultivate when you progress in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Very important pointers. Now we are walking towards the edge of our conversation. So we want to your thoughts, your suggestion, and your guidance also for the researchers who want to move from academia to industry, how they should prepare themselves, either skill wise or their communication, or how they should approach that at least they can get some offers or ultimately join the industry.
Yeah, I think for me, I definitely, you know, persistence is definitely the key, and also making a lot of um, connections with people outside of work, where whether it be through LinkedIn messages and finding people in the field that are doing something similar or have done something similar to what I've done. I've contacted them, or at different. So let's say if I'm interested in translational science was my main thing, or flow cytometry was my main thing. So I would find groups that are flow cytometry groups, or confocal microscopy groups, and I would go to their happy hours, and I would go to events that they put up, whether it be a small 1 day or 2 day conference. And the whole point, so when I go and I engage with those people, I don't go and say I need a job. Don't lead with that, obviously, but I think part of it is just building, like I exist, I'm a human being, I'm here, and just making yourself known to these people is enough. Not so much saying, hey, do you have a job at your company? No, not that approach. And then, like, eventually when a job does open up, and if you have built a rapport with this person, you can go back to them via email or via LinkedIn, and say, hey, I saw a job at your company, can you please refer me to this company? And then that is the main way, I think. Main, and I people know this already, but I think execution of it is, somewhat variable. But I think seeking a referral in a way that doesn't come off as a lot of work to the other person, and also, if we are able to add value to their lives in some way, then building a relationship where you also send them maybe an article that might be of interest to you, or you also contribute in some way. So I think that really makes that easier on, because in at the end of the day, it is like cold calling. Like, you are cold calling these people to help you, and they don't owe you anything. So that's a difficult dynamic to navigate. So I think that definitely helps. The other thing that definitely helps, again, is if you don't have some of the skills that you are looking for, that they are looking for in the job description, then how you address those things. So there are 2 or 3 ways you can address them. One way being, if you don't have a specific knowledge, then you seek that specific knowledge by either an extension course or a LinkedIn course, or if you haven't done project management ever, but the job has some project management, then are you building that skill set somehow? Or if it needs flow cytometry, can you take a few online courses and attend a few labs to understand that? Or, which, I mean, of course, flow cytometry isn't something that you will learn in a couple of hours, but I'm just saying, like, it's an example where you build that skill set. Or if you don't have that skill set, how you address that in your interview, saying, I don't know this particular thing, but instead I'm offering this to you. So making it as an exchange, where I don't bring this to the table, but I do have this and this and this and this. So I am adding value. So making your value known in other ways, that's the other way. So I think it's all a matter of, nobody's going to have 100% of the things that people ask in a job description, but how you make yourself an attractive candidate is important.
This is very important, and that's how you end up getting offer and then joining the job which you really want. Aarti, this was great having you at Researcher Celebrity at this platform. And at the end, we always tell our viewers that if they want to contact you for more guidance and specific questions, they can either email you, or if they want Empowering Science Foundation to help them, we are there to bridge you with different researcher celebrities to mentor you, because that is one of the programs which we also run is the mentorship program. If you are interested in any of our researcher celebrities profile and you want them to mentor you, we are here to connect it with you. So to all the viewers, we'll say stay tuned for another episode of Researcher Celebrity. And to Dr. Aarti, we'll say thank you very much for sharing the journey with us and motivating next generation of researchers.
Thank you for having me. It was a really good call. Thank you.
Thank you.